Hello, everyone. Welcome to Raising Eagles. We are so excited to have you with us for our first session for 2026. Kind of feels weird to say out loud, 2026. That's a big year since I was born 40 years ago. All right. So I'm Ashley Croson, Director of Community Services. And on this panel with me today is Christy Alexander. She is our Family and Community Engagement Liaison. And my mouse is clicking faster than I can talk. And we work together with Becky Wigington, who's the Director of Counseling, to figure out what are some really good sessions that would be of benefit to our families so that we can partner together to best support our kids, because it takes a village, as we all know. We are so excited about some upcoming Raising Eagle sessions. We're going to bring Mackenzie back on January 22nd. Today, primarily, we're talking about building healthy routines and habits for the littles, the K-6 kids. And then we're going to talk about how that looks a little bit different for our teens on January 22nd. And then we're very blessed to have Chanel Campbell and Kelly Brazier. They're two of our instructional specialists in our district who are going to talk to us about how can we foster the creativity and problem-solving skills at home. So if you've got a kiddo and they're glued to the TV and you're like, oh God, I got to get them off this TV, or maybe they you just need some ideas. They will be joining us to help with that. And they are absolutely wonderful. I used to personally work with them at Vaughn Elementary, and they're fabulous. So you definitely don't want to miss it. If you are interested in doing the Raising Eagles Liftoff task, which is an opportunity for you to go back and kind of reflect on the session that we had and think about how you can apply that in your home, please feel free to dive into those. Those are listed on our website. We will be hosting a little end of year celebration for families who decide to complete those activities. A little props to you for going above and beyond. And so if you ever have any questions about any of that, please don't hesitate to reach out. All right, I don't want to waste any more of our time, so I'm going to hand it over to Mackenzie Harris. She is going to talk about building healthy routines and habits for child development. So welcome, Mackenzie.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. It's such an honor to be here today. I see that other people are still trickling in. So I'll give this update now. And obviously throughout the presentation, I'll also kind of just pass it over to you guys and make sure that if any questions are coming up during the presentation, please correct me if I'm wrong, Ashley and Christy, but they can go ahead and they can like in real time send questions to the chat.
Absolutely. They can put their questions in the chat. And then do you want us to stop and let you know, or do you want to hold them to the end?
That would be great. Yeah. Okay. So just a little bit before I get the presentation pulled up, because I know sometimes just with anyone, when you have things that you're reading, you don't always listen to all the words. So today I have a lot of slides. So I think I have like 45 slides that we will not go over. We're not going to go over all of them. Some of them are just there that whenever they send this out to you guys afterwards, that y'all will be able to reference as some of the things that we discussed. So please know this is like your time as parents. Y'all took the time to show up and ask questions. Part of this too is that Ashley was kind enough to send me some of y'all's advanced questions yesterday. And unfortunately, I did not have time to rework my presentation to answer those. So there might be some topics that don't have specific slides to cover today, but I do want to make sure I'm answering your specific questions as parents and things that you want to get out of today. So please just chime in as they come up and we can kind of go from there. So let me go ahead and share my screen. As y'all probably were seeing as we started, bear with us. Technology is tough. All right, is it going to presentation mode? Have y'all, okay, we full screen? It's big enough for, okay, good. All of our visions as we get older gets worse, and so we gotta make sure it's big enough. Okay, so howdy y'all, I'm Mackenzie Harris. I'm a registered dietitian and certified eating disorder specialist. I've had the privilege of speaking to you guys as a community a few times, and I'm just honored to be asked to come back this year to chat about a slightly different topic, but I still like to bring some of the same themes that I've spoken on previously into our discussion today. So what my presentation is called today is actually called Nourish to Flourish, how food movement and structure impacts our kids' bodies and brains. So that's kind of how I'm kind of capturing today. It is a tall order to go over how all of these things impact your kids' brains. So again, ask questions as we kind of go along. Let's make sure we get there. Okay, so again, this is me. This is my background. I'm not going to get into it too much, except for to give an overview of the lens in which I come into today's session with you guys. So as a dietitian, sometimes you'll hear nutritionist. I put that in air quotes because nutritionists don't have degrees. They can just get an online certification. So I went through a lot of schooling and a lot of clinical background. most of which was done in the eating disorder realm. So I come with a very heavy mental health background, and a very heavy athlete background. So me as a dietitian versus other dietitians, we all have different specialties. We're all trained clinically similar, but then a lot of our nuanced expertise comes from our work with clients. So that's the lens in which I operate today, is a lot of eating disorder background. So I'm going to teach you guys how to hopefully prevent disordered eating in your households. And then even more than that, also with having the privilege of working with a lot of therapists as my coworkers and colleagues, a lot of techniques and tips that I've learned alongside them in my work. But please note that I am not a therapist. So I know some of your questions that y'all sent over are more therapeutic in mind. So again, there's a lot of great presenters, it seems like Ashley has coming on, that are therapists and things that you can ask those questions to. I'll do my best to walk you through how that pertains to food and body. So as a dietitian, I'm always through the scope of how does mental health impact food and body and movement, obviously within that. And that's what I can speak on. Everything outside of that is outside of my quote scope. So I can speak on it, but then I'll pass you guys off to a therapist or other therapeutic people. This is just an objective. Y'all can read that later. I'd be remiss if I didn't start with the basics. This is super important. This is how I, as a dietitian, how I encourage you as a parent to think about health. So obviously I always kind of come from it as health, but when you think of health, and this is one of my favorite slides ever, it's like, this is how literally the dictionary defines health. It's the state of being free from illness or injury, a person's mental or physical condition. It's the condition of being sound in body, mind, or spirit, right? But societally, we think of health as this, right? And this is more for us as parents, but we think of you should aim to be fit or thin and skinny, eat clean, superfoods, guilt-free, healthy, right? All of these kind of language words that we think of health. And we also think we should avoid processed foods, junk food, cheat days, calories, carbs, things that are sinful, sugar, bloating, right? So when I say like, what does healthy mean to you? And I ask all my clients this is typically what I hear, but that is not how I define it. Okay. So this is really, again, this is more of, you're not going to go to your 6-year-old and be like, well, sweetie, the dimensions of wellness, this is more for you as a parent on how to conceptualize you and your kids' health. So this also will apply to you. And then we'll kind of get into how I break it down into a little bit more of a simplified version for kiddos. But this is the 8 dimensions of wellness. What this means to me is that all of these factors impact your health. Okay. So as a dietitian, yes, obviously I live a lot in the physical health, which is again, like your labs, your weight, your heart rate, your blood pressure, the nutrients that go into your body, like all of the physical health components. I live in this world pretty often, but I like to think that you are not, quote, healthy, if I were to use that phrase, if the rest of these things are out of whack. So if your relationship with food keeps you from being emotional health, would be like mental health. So like if it impacts your mental health, if your food is impacting your mental health, then that's not healthy. If it's impacting your work, or how is your work impacting your food, if that's not in balance, then that is also obviously out of whack or not healthy. If financially, you, in order to, I know we oftentimes hear like the whole eating clean or eating organic and all of that kind of language, but if financially that's going to stress you or not be like fit within your financial confines, right? That also wouldn't be healthy, and vice versa, right? So this is how I conceptualize it. And like for the kids, and this is more for the teens, I always like show them this picture, but I'm like, imagine like a DJ board. I don't know. Again, I try to be cool for the kids. So imagine a DJ board and all the switches that you can dial up or down. So that's how I want you to think of health. So if you are only focusing on how physical health is impacting your life, but then your mental health is all the way dialed back, again, that's not a healthy place for you or your kiddos to be. And then vice versa. If you or your kiddos are only focused on school and grades, right? But then their social health and kind of things like that are like dialed back. So this is just kind of like, what elements of your life are you focusing energy on, and what elements of your life are you not in balance with? And that's kind of how I encapsulate or capture what does health look like. So one of my favorite phrases is balance, variety, and moderation with food. And the same thing goes for all of these facets of you and your kid's life. Okay. So again, that's more complex than a 6-year-old will most likely understand. So we're going to break it down in terms of 4 pillars of health regulation for kids. Okay. So these are kind of the 4 pillars that I kind of like say would be important for us to focus on. They fit into this big picture. But again, this is really kind of how we can break it down into what I think is important for us with regulating with our kids. So, of course, as a dietitian, I'm a little biased. Balanced nutrition is going to be a huge part of that health regulation. Body respect and support. So this is like body image, how we conceptualize ourselves, confidence, kind of all of those components. So more of that eating disorder prevention part of what I would like to work on with you guys. Joyful movements is the physical activity part of things. So play and rest and moving our body and sports and all of the things that kind of make us kids and also make us human. And then lastly, rest, sleep, and daily rhythms. So it's very important that we have kind of a consistent structure for our kiddos in order for them to thrive in all kind of forms of quote health. And again, this is really simplifying it, but it's a little bit easier for y'all to think of. These are the 4 things I really need to be focusing on with my kiddos. Okay, pillar number 1, I'm going to start with nutrition basics. We'll just kind of crank them out. Again, there are a lot of slides in here. You will get a copy of all of these. This is really, again, for you as parents, it is y'all's job to like kind of, there's the division of responsibility, right? You guys as parents are the owners of the what am I providing my kid? And when am I providing it, right? And so that's why I'm really giving you guys this nutrition framework. You're not going to show this slide to your kids, but for you guys to understand a supported metabolism, or for your body, for your kiddos and your bodies, this actually can apply to you as well. For our bodies to feel supported with nutrition, it is important that we eat consistently. And so we start off the bottom up. So adequacy means, are we getting enough? And then if we think in terms of more adult language, we're getting enough calories. Are we getting enough for kiddos' energy, right? So that is my number 1 focus as a dietitian, is getting enough, right? Then we're working on balance. So are we, even though we're getting enough calories from, we'll talk about kids, goldfish, okay? So we love some goldfish. So we're getting enough calories of goldfish. Great. That's obviously our first goal. But then also, what about the rest of the food groups? Are we getting not only goldfish, but also some protein, some fats, some fruits and vegetables, some dairy, right? So balance is getting enough is adequacy. Balance is all the food groups. So all those macronutrients or food groups. The next is cool. Now we got all of those food groups, but are we getting a different kind of carbohydrate? So not only just goldfish, but can we do goldfish and potatoes? Can we do goldfish, potatoes, and oatmeal, right? And starting to get kind of the variety that comes with that. So that is the third thing. Obviously, all of these things are equally as important, but when prioritizing what you need to be working on with your kiddo, especially when we get into that picky eating discussion, that's kind of the hierarchy of as kiddos, they need to be getting enough so that they can grow. You actually develop all of your bones before the age of about 23. And so this is a pivotal time for our kiddos' bodies to be getting what they need. And then lastly, individual nutrients. So individual foods means like omega-3s and B12 and all of these like vitamins and minerals. So like we can focus on those. I think sometimes as adults and as parents, we think like, oh, well, we need to get these like really great vitamins for our kids. And yes, we do. And vitamins are incredibly important, but getting a great omega-3 supplement won't mean anything if we aren't getting enough energy or calories for our kiddo in the first place. Okay. So this is kind of how I want you guys to be conceptualizing just the basics of nutrition. So as a whole, eating every 3 to 4 hours is very important. We'll talk about some of the nuances that come with that with when kiddos maybe don't feel as hungry because of ADHD medications, because they're trying to play, things like that. Regardless of whether they have hunger cues or not, it is important that they are eating consistently throughout the day in terms of blood sugars, energy, etc. When they do eat, pairing some sort of carbohydrate source, so a starch or fruit or veg, with some sort of protein or fat source. You can also add dairy in there because obviously as kiddos, typically milk is a really easy one for them to get, or yogurts or cheese and stuff like that. So protein or fat would be also a dairy option. And then meals, aiming to make sure that we have at least one of all of the food groups as we're kind of building out our kiddos' meals. So we'll kind of talk about that a little bit as we go along. I think I saw a question pop in. Okay, perfect. I'm glad that you're enjoying it. This is perfect timing for your 6-year-old. Again, I'm not going to go over these. These are just the basics of the macronutrients. So when you're thinking about or talking about with your kiddos as the parent, you are the dietitian in training for your family, you guys. So you guys are having this discussion of what does it look like? So carbohydrates, they might start seeing as they get into older elementary school years, like calories, carbs, proteins, fats. Like they're going to start hearing a lot of that potentially through social media or YouTube. I know like a lot of kiddos love YouTube and stuff like that. So this is just some ways to explain it without getting into too much of the science. Of course, I want you to understand macronutrients as parents so that way we can explain that appropriately to our kiddos. So these are all on here for you guys to kind of look into. Again, I'm not going to go into it. It's a little bit too deep of a dive for us today, but that's obviously why you would meet with a dietitian to kind of get into it. Okay. So these are just the importance of all of those food groups. Mood and food. So I don't know how about you guys, but when I am stressed, I typically crave different foods. When I am sad or depressed, I typically sometimes will cope with food. Boredom. I don't know if you've ever been like, am I hungry or am I bored? Like excitement. So if we experience those things, our kids probably do too. Okay. So what I like to say for you guys, as you guys are going into this, some of the language I use with my kiddos are you head hungry or are you tummy hungry? Right. So I kind of educate them of like, is this because you're just like thinking about goldfish or are we like feeling like tummy hungry? Like, is your stomach growling? Are we finding that we're like, you're needing energy? And so you're kind of trying to get them to clue into their body. We'll get into this a little bit later, but it's something called intuitive eating. So kids are actually born as intuitive eaters, which means they listen to their body and they eat when they're hungry, stop when they're full. Right. If you've ever had your kid come up to you and they have like a handful of goldfish and they're like, I'm done. And it's like, what? Like, no, like come back. You got to like, I know we were probably part of the generation of the Clean Plate Club. I don't know if y'all were a part of that. I am a proud member of my parents put me in the Clean Plate Club where I had to finish my food before I could go do other things. But as kids, we actually are born to like listen to our body. Obviously it's not as simple as that, but for the most part, we do want to help our kiddos honor and respect what their body is telling them. And then also tie in how is their emotions or what they're feeling in that moment of, well, I know you're excited to go play. So now you're like really excited. And so you're kind of like eat really quickly before you go, but like you're still gonna be allowed to go play afterwards. So let's make sure we get what your body needs to have energy to go do that. And then you can go do that, right? Other coping skills, if you find that your kiddos do eat out of boredom or out of stress or out of sadness, is mindful movement can be a really helpful thing to like go out for a walk or stuff like that, play, things of that sort. They're not typically in elementary school at an appropriate age to go like, quote, work out. And I would never recommend that. That's actually very much can become disordered. But some sort of like connection with body through movement and play. Journaling, obviously, if they're old enough, playing games and things like that, connecting with loved ones, so you guys, and then checking in with their body. So this is, again, as a background, I am an eating disorder dietitian. So I like to really teach you guys some of the warning signs of what this looks like. So if this were a spectrum of, quote, normal eating, so intuitive eating is like eating when you're hungry, stopping when you're full. And then eating disorder is where your body is really, or your eating habits and your food is really being driven by inappropriate thoughts, coping skills, etc. It's a spectrum. Okay. So on one end of the spectrum, intuitive eating, as I just mentioned, is listening to your hunger cues, eats when hungry, stops when full, has a more positive body image, has a variety of foods, all that kind of stuff. So I like to think of it just like listening to your body. Disordered eating can be like when our kiddos or ourselves, and I have clients as young as 6 that have eating disorders. And that's why I know you're probably like, this is really deep, Mackenzie, but I do have some kiddos that are pretty young that struggle with this. So I want to be sure that you guys leave this with some tactical knowledge on this. So disordered eating is when our brain starts telling us what our body needs, right? So it can be like, I shouldn't have that because I've had too much. I shouldn't have more goldfish because I've already had too much today. And they typically will sometimes get this messages from us as parents and loved ones. I feel bad when I eat this because so-and-so, their lunch is a lot healthier than mine. So I feel bad eating my lunch because it has more, quote, junk food in it. If we as parents or adults around kiddos use the language of junk or good or bad, and we'll get into that in a little bit. So this is like where it's starting to disrupt the ability to eat what's appropriate for the body. And then an eating disorder is when that's destructive. So like we're no longer able to meet our body's needs and it's starting to harm our body and our relationships with people. Again, I say all that to say, my hope is that with this knowledge, this will never be you and your loved ones. It's not that this is saying that you will experience this with your loved ones. It's more of a, here's what to look out for. Okay. So these are some early signs of things to look for if those behaviors or those thoughts around food are becoming too obsessive or becoming kind of disordered. Okay. So these are just things, and I like to say warning signs because this still means that you need to be reaching out to someone like a dietitian or a therapist who's an eating disorder specialist, or your counseling team at Allen ISD to say, hey, I'm noticing some patterns and I'm a little bit worried, right? And it's not necessarily that you were automatically diagnosing them with some sort of disordered eating. It's more of just like, I want to get clear on, is this something I should be worried about? I was just actually chatting with the McKinney ISD team as well. And I was telling some of the counselors some like really subtle warning signs that actually aren't on here would be like, if you start noticing that your kiddos love a certain thing, and then all of a sudden they start losing interest in things that they loved at some point. If you notice their variety of food starts getting smaller and smaller. I know sometimes like at lunch, a lot of kids maybe don't bring a full lunch that they sit at the table with. And so they'll start packing differently or want to like maybe get school lunch. And so you just start like kind of noticing subtle changes of like what has always been the case now so subtly starts to shift. So those are some things that I just kind of like keep an eye out for. If you just start noticing some subtle shifts. As an eating disorder dietitian, as a dietitian that has gone to school for this, I will tell you right now, in my experience, parents' gut instinct is better than anything in this world. If a parent comes to me and they're like, I have a gut instinct that something's off, typically something's off. So trust your gut. Again, that doesn't, all of us as professionals, we go into those conversations with you and the kiddo very much curious. We don't go in with any assumptions that something's going on. We just like to ask questions to make sure that we're also kind of sussing out and making sure their relationship with food, body, and movement is appropriate. So again, I'm gonna leave this here for you guys to review at some point. The biggest thing for me on this though is as we were starting to build out our language with our kids around healthy habits, as we're starting to build out our routines and things of that sort, this is also incredibly important for me to go over with you guys. So with this is actually called the biopsychosocial assessment. Now, my therapist counterparts are the ones who complete this, but this is how we conceptualize or work with someone when we're kind of trying to assess what's going on. So the most common kind of symptoms or signs of people that would develop disordered eating are those perfectionism tendencies. So like need to be perfect, difficulty regulating emotions, and starting to have some body dissatisfaction. There is really age appropriate, like getting used to body changing, right? Because their bodies are changing a lot in elementary school. And so there is a lot of like, when I say body dissatisfaction, it's not like them asking questions about their body. You'll notice, again, gut instinct. You'll notice as a parent when it's kind of gone to like a level of like they're thinking about it a lot. There's also this idea of social pressure to be thin or muscular, bullying and teasing, and lack of social support. So like the earlier that kiddos get on social media, so when we're building out those routines, I don't think it's age appropriate for elementary school kids to have social media. I even worry about YouTube sometimes. I'm going to be really honest with you, just because sometimes those follow-up videos that come after the video that your kid's watching might not be aligned with or appropriate. I know there's obviously YouTube Kids, but then we just got to make sure we're very aware of what is being consumed when on YouTube. So when building out that screen time or that TV time, I know we had a lot of questions about screen time, making sure that we have really good parental controls on that. And we're also checking in and making sure we're kind of looking at the history of what our kiddos are watching. And then just getting ahead of if they did see something that might be maybe outside of their age appropriateness, having conversations proactively before they're kind of in their head being like, well, now I had this one kid who was about 8, watch some nutrition videos, and then now have like a lot of like really black and white beliefs about food. But what you're going to learn today is food isn't black and white. It is supposed to be in the gray area, and food is supposed to be fun and enjoyed. But then now they kind of have a lot of science that they're kind of, or rules that they've made for themselves after watching a few videos. But I say all that to say, the only thing that we can really control when disordered eating could potentially show up is this history of dieting. And that's lovingly calling you guys out, adults in the room. Okay. So when we, in our language around food, centers around dieting and making our bodies smaller as adults, that can very much pass down to kids because they look to us as role models, right? And so this history of dieting is probably the biggest thing that I can protect the next generation from, of talking about dieting and how we discuss and talk about food. So that's like why this kind of whole introduction, just for you to know that this part right here is typically the catalyst that starts disordered eating. And it really starts with us as kind of the adults in the room. It starts here. Okay. Again, these are all kind of here for you guys to see. I'm not going to get into this too much, except for I did want to take a moment. These are the most common eating disorders. Y'all can read more about it on your own time. I don't want to make this an eating disorder presentation, but I did want to take a minute to talk about ARFID. So ARFID is something that will be most commonly seen in y'all's age kids. Now, I will say eating disorders do not discriminate. So you could experience some of the other symptoms, the other ones listed on the last slide. And again, that's when you'd reach out to me. I'm a free resource for you guys. Obviously, if we were to have sessions together, then you'd become a client. But like, if you guys just have questions on like, hey, I need advice or where to go, or like, should I even like look into seeing a dietitian? Please just reach out to me as you guys review these slides, because it is a lot of info. But this is probably the one that I'm going to spend a second on. So ARFID is a relatively new diagnosis. It's called avoidant restrictive food intake disorder. I would say 70% of my caseload is actually ARFID kiddos. And so what it looks like is it's like, quote, picky eating, but it's not, but it looks like a very restrictive amount of foods that a kiddo feels comfortable eating. Now, there is age appropriate kind of pickiness that can come up with kids, but it's to the point where there's a lot of fear and a lot of like really hard boundaries that your kid holds where they aren't willing to go outside of their safe foods. So there's typically 5 foods that they feel comfortable eating, and they don't feel comfortable going outside of that. And so with ARFID, it's not because of body image. It's not because of any of that. It's purely because of 3 different things. One is texture or sensory considerations. So a food's texture, like blueberries are squishy. I don't like blueberries because they're squishy. I don't like chicken because it's chewy. Those kinds of things. If there's a lot of sensory considerations that keeps them from eating enough protein because of the chicken being chewy, then that would be something that would need to be worked on, obviously, because we need all the food groups, as we went over a second ago. Blueberries being squishy, of course, we wouldn't get enough fiber, fruits and vegetables, and antioxidants. We need to go over that. But it's typically a sensory consideration for one part of it. Second part of it is fear of aversive consequences, but it's a fancy way of saying just fear of something bad happening. So fear of choking, fear of having to poop at school, fear of having to pee at school, like all of those kinds of things. That would be kind of the one part of ARFID as well, of that fear of bad things happening that keeps them from eating certain foods. They only eat soft foods because they're afraid something bad will happen, or they don't drink water before school, so they end up dehydrated, and so that's so they don't have to pee at school. And the last one is just general lack of interest in food. So a lot of kiddos nowadays really struggle with appetite. Part of that can be because of like neurodivergence, like ADHD. So I will self-disclose, I have ADHD to the nth degree. And so I will say personally, I actually don't really feel my hunger cues the same as other people might. And so that's where we're going to talk about structure a little bit. Structure with kids, no matter if they have ADHD or not, is very important, because sometimes we need structure. Like, have you ever heard of Pavlov's dog? So Pavlov had a dog, and every time he fed the dog, he rang a bell. And so when the bell rang, the dog started to salivate. So the body can get used to, at 8 a.m., if I always have breakfast, then I know that I'm going to have breakfast. And the hunger and fullness cues start getting used to 8 a.m., 10 a.m., noon, right? And so it gets used to. That's why you notice coming out of Christmas break, I'm sure y'all's lives are kind of chaotic, let's be honest, because you got out of that routine and now your kids are all over the place because now they don't have a routine. And that's because the metabolism, the hormone, like everything starts to regulate when we get on a schedule. And that's really helpful for not only kids that are younger that you guys have, right? Because you have the younger ones, but then also for people like myself who I'm not young anymore, who have ADHD. And I need to make sure that I keep myself on a schedule, and I'll notice that my appetite also get off. So again, ARFID is really, really common nowadays. It wasn't a diagnosis until 2013. So you're starting to hear more about it. But again, most of my clients are now struggling with this, and it is a long journey to get through that, but that's a whole other presentation. Okay, so speaking of parents, and I think I saw something pop up. Did we have
Yeah,
Perfect.
there is a question. Well, somebody said they had to go, but couldn't wait to look at the rest of the slides. But there is a question. My 7-year-old says she's hungry right at bedtime. It often looks like she's putting off bed or putting off homework. We talk about how she's likely thirsty or like she probably wants to put off a certain task, but she is firm in her claims of hunger. Do you think there's any legitimacy to the claims? Any advice on how to talk to her about without accusing or shaming her?
This is such a good question because it is really hard. Sometimes kiddos will sometimes use different excuses for different things. My best advice is again be curious. So, and this is actually on the last slide, but like when all of these conversations take place, go into it with curiosity of like, well, sweetheart, what did you have earlier today? It seems like you're always hungry at bedtime. Do like, and if you also as the parent can think back to like, what did they have for dinner? Did they eat all of the food groups? Keep in mind, again, in the slides, you'll kind of go back and look at, but protein and fats help us feel satisfied and full, right? So that's where kind of some of that fullness comes. Obviously, all of it together will add to the satisfaction or like the fullness part of it. But if you notice that they typically don't eat a lot of, like if your 7-year-old doesn't eat a lot of protein, we might be one of those things of, well, no wonder you're hungry, silly goose. Like, you didn't have any of your chicken. And that is what Mackenzie told me. And guys, I am like the best excuse. You can always use me and say, hey, I met Miss Mackenzie today, and she told me we have to have more, a little bit more protein. Like you can use my, I'll be the best excuse in your house. Be like, well, Miss Mackenzie said. But what I will say is that I would just get curious about, is she eating consistently throughout the day? So if you look back at like with one of those early slides of like how to structure nutrition, is she eating every few hours? Is she getting all the food groups? When she does eat, is she pairing the protein with a carb or like with a protein, dairy, or fat with a carb source? So those are the kind of things that I would start getting curious. But again, as you as the dietitian in training, I would see if is she actually going to be satisfied or full? Our body typically does start eating food every 3 to 4 hours as they're young. And when they're younger, sometimes every 2 to 3 hours. And at 7, she's probably about to hit puberty. So there's sometimes those periods where they start getting really hungry for a few months and they shoot up a few inches taller, right? So it's also sometimes the body kind of growing and growing and growing. Hope that answers the question, but obviously again, feel free to reach out and I'm happy to kind of dive into it a little bit more.
There are some more questions. They're coming through pretty quickly. Do you want to
Love
hold to
that.
the end or?
Yeah, let me get a few more slides in and then we'll just do every other slide. We'll kind of ask a question, okay?
Okay.
So as parents, it is really important to you guys, as you guys are building out language around food and body image, so this applies to both, neutral language, neutral language, neutral language. Okay. So what that means is kind of what we just talked about. I think Emily had put in her question of like, how do I talk about this without shame? So good versus bad, healthy versus unhealthy, eating clean versus dirty, having junk food. I know we all tell our kids, no, that's a bunch of junk, right? That has, whether we intend it or not, a moral value that we've put on it, right? So I don't know about you guys, but like if I wake up and I had a donut, because society thinks that donuts are not good for me, I might be like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. I'm so silly. How dare I have a donut, right? And we might feel like that guilt that comes with it. And then when we eat a salad, we're like, wow, I am so healthy. Like, look at me go. Like, you just like have this like feeling of like, I can take on the world. Same thing when we exercise, like, oh, I didn't exercise today. I shouldn't eat anything, right? And then when we exercise, we're like, wow, I deserve this cupcake. You know, it's that mentality that we all have, right? And so our kids pick up on that language. Our job is to protect the next generation from them having the same shame, guilt, etc., that we've had to experience, right? Our parents didn't know better. And that's okay. But what we know scientifically is that language is important. So how I use language, this is really important for you guys. How I use language is that an apple and a cupcake are morally equal. There's no such thing, like it's not good or bad. They benefit our body in different ways. And now you're gonna be like, Mackenzie, that's crazy. I promise. So think back to one of those early slides. Remember that 8 dimensions wheel? Okay. So there's 8 dimensions of wellness. Apple provides that physical health, right? Provides physical health like vitamins, fiber, helps you poop, helps your cholesterol, right? It helps your body physically. But then a cupcake provides the other dimensions, right? It helps socially connect. So if it's that birthday day at school, I don't know if you as adults miss those days, but like it was so fun bringing cupcakes for your friends and then getting sung to for your birthday. If we think about the holidays we just passed, like there might be cultural foods or foods that you make with your grandma. So let's say you made that cupcake with grandma and you're connecting with grandma, and that's a memory you're going to have forever. Those things also benefit you, and we have to have those social and emotional connections as humans. And that's not a bad thing. We shouldn't feel shame for connecting as humans, right? And so both of those have to exist. And you can teach your kids, well, that's really like that was really helpful and beneficial for you connecting with friends, but we got to make sure we get some stuff that helps your physical body too, right? And so that way you can kind of just talk about how it's benefiting them. So again, that positive psychology of this is both benefiting you just in different ways. So if we had a cupcake, that's great, and I'm so glad you had fun with your friends, but your body still needs those Legos or building blocks to make sure that you're healthy, right? So that's kind of how I would use it. Okay. Let's do one more question because I know we have a ton of them coming in, which is so exciting.
All right. My son does not like the taste of vegetables or fruit and strictly avoids it. Any suggestions to make him comfortable with veggies and fruits?
That is so valid, but so valid. I mean, I'm going to be honest with you. Evolutionarily, we don't typically crave fruits and vegetables because they don't give us as much like energy, right? We don't give them as many calories from fruits and vegetables. And also, if you think back to what I was just talking about with some of that ARFID mentality, I'm not saying your kid has ARFID, just like the mentality of kids, a goldfish, every time you eat it, is the exact same. A blueberry can be squishy, it can be firm, it can be sour, it can be sweet. So it's variable every single time. So that's that like sensory consideration of like, kids know what to expect every time they have a goldfish, but they have no idea what they're getting when they have this blueberry, right? So sometimes it's also like the distress tolerance of like in like not knowing what to expect when you have that. So what I typically recommend is with ARFID treatment, which is again, you don't have ARFID, but I'm just saying like when we're trying to expose our kids to new things and kind of work through those beliefs, it's something called exposure and response prevention. Okay. So exposure and response prevention is a therapeutic tool. So therapists use it, but dietitians do as well. And it's the idea that the more you expose yourself to something, the more normal that thing becomes. Okay. So, for example, if it's blueberries, the more you experience blueberries, the more they're around blueberries, the more normal that will become. It's the same thing if I'm afraid of spiders, right? So if they're afraid of vegetables, I'm afraid of spiders. If I wanted a pet spider, I can't go tomorrow into Petco and just buy one, right? Because I'm gonna be freaking terrified. But I might go to my friend's house who owns a spider, and I might be like, oh, it's kind of cute, but like I'm a little scared. And then maybe I'll like watch her hold it. My friend doesn't have a spider, but just as an example, might watch her hold it, and then eventually maybe I'll pet it, right? And so like I'm taking my stair step up to getting comfortable with it. Same thing with fruits and vegetables. So maybe start with something that we call this food mapping. Start with something that is similar to something that your son likes. So for example, Cheerios, cereal, right? Right now they have regular Cheerios. They also then have fruits and veggie Cheerios. So maybe we start with you mix half regular Cheerios, half the fruit and veggie Cheerios. See if they like it. Then maybe we move to, there's actually like frozen Dippin' Dots. Like, so you know Dippin' Dots, like the frozen ice cream, little dot ice cream. So there's now like fruits and vegetable versions of that. So you can actually get like, they're called fruit pearls. So you can go try some of those, like those ones. And if they like that, then maybe we can say, oh, you really like strawberries. Why don't we make a strawberry smoothie? And then you can kind of, you start mapping out something that's similar with something that's new. And you kind of then, once they like the new thing, then you go to the next thing that's kind of similar to that. And you kind of keep, and it is so much more complicated than how I'm making it right now. It is a long process that obviously I'm trained in doing. So this is just the basics. There are 2 social media accounts that I want you as a parent to follow. So one of them is Feeding Picky Kids, and one of them is Feeding Picky Children. Both of those things that I just kind of talked about, exposures and food mapping, they give you examples on their Instagram accounts where they say this is actually the example of how you can do that. So that might be a good visual. And then obviously feel free to reach out and I'm happy to walk through it with you. Okay, one more question. Well, I'm gonna go with this one, then I'm gonna do one more question and then keep going. Okay, so I already kind of told you guys diets are dangerous. So this is one thing that I would be, again, remiss to not talk about as a dietitian. Putting our kids on diets and also putting ourselves on diets, let's be honest, is dangerous. So first of all, as an adolescent dietitian, it is never recommended for kids to lose weight. It actually harms their growth. It makes it difficult with the growth chart. So it is actually better to then like kind of strategically work with a dietitian if you're worried about a kiddo's weight, to work with a dietitian to then get them back on the growth chart and make sure that we kind of get them back on the curve slowly and not any sort of rapid changes. So that's number one. That's with kids. With adults, it's also not recommended to diet, right? Because our body has no idea that we're trying to lose weight. It just thinks, oh my gosh, I don't have enough to eat. And then we start slowing down our metabolism and rationing food. So again, think back to diets are what typically causes eating disorders in adults and adolescents. So I really encourage you guys to avoid dieting as much as possible. There's a whole other presentation that I want to focus on your kiddos, but there's a lot of information in these next two slides that you guys can review as to why diets are dangerous and what can happen with them. The biggest thing that I want to make sure I talk about with kiddos, okay, is that when kiddos are not getting enough, so it's called the Minnesota Starvation Study. Again, you can read about it on my slides. When any human, obviously including kids, do not eat enough, what happens, they found through the study, is that we have increased irritability. So they get kind of cranky. So if you notice your kids having meltdowns, breakdowns, crying, yelling, hitting, not doing good in grades, all that kind of stuff, that's a sign that we might not be eating consistently enough, or when was the last time they ate. Inability to focus. So if they're not eating breakfast before school or they're not eating consistently throughout the day, you might notice their grades slip because they're not able to focus on things because the glucose levels or the blood energy levels is low. And so their body's not having enough energy to do what it needs to do. You might notice them get kind of sad, or apathy is kind of just like no emotions on their face, just kind of like a lump on a log, right? You might notice that there's a lot more anxiety. They might become obsessed with food. So even as sometimes young kiddos will want to start baking or cooking their food. And again, that's part of it is exciting exploration, but also, again, you're just going to notice that when our brain doesn't get enough nutrition, we can't do the things that we need to do. So you'll notice mood and school changes. So that's just the biggest thing in this section. And as an adult, all of these things happen to us. So this is also for us. We get hangry and anxious. So we need to make sure that we're our best forms of ourselves. All right, let me do one more question. We'll kind of off and on question and then slide.
All right. My 5-year-old daughter in kindergarten takes lunch from home sometimes, and most of the time she brings 80% of her food back home. Any suggestions to improve her eating habits for this situation?
Yeah, of course. So obviously there's a lot more to the question that I would there's a lot more that I would love to know in order to give you the best answer possible. But I think my biggest advice is be curious. Just reflect it back to her. Hey, sweet girl, I noticed that you always bring back a lot of your lunch. What's going on? And then you can run through a list of things that might be happening. Like, do you not have enough time? Do you not like what I'm packing you? Are your friends not eating lunch? Would you rather be playing? All of those kind of it's almost like pick your adventure, all of those you would have a different conversation after that. So if she likes playing, you can be like, oh my gosh, I love that brings you so much joy. But you have to have energy in order to play well. If you want to win at kickball, you got to make sure you're bringing the fire with your nutrition, right? So why don't we try to pack and make sure that you at least have these two things, and then you can even put a sticker or something on the two foods that she needs to make sure she finishes before she goes and plays, right? And so it just kind of it's pick your own adventure. So it depends. If she's being bullied, obviously that's a different conversation. If her friends at school aren't eating lunch, then maybe you talk to the teacher and say, hey, my kiddo's not eating her lunch because she feels like she's the only one eating lunch. There's so many different things that we can kind of explore. So again, please reach out, but that's probably my best vague answer. Okay. So with this one, with the body diversity, so I like to use, this is actually a video. So when I send this out to you guys, it's called Poodle Science. This is how you guys can discuss body image with your kids. And it is the cutest video, but it talks about how body diversity and how we're all meant to be different in terms of dogs. So if y'all are dog people and whatever animal your kid likes, use that animal because it'll get them bought in more. I did have a kid once say that they were a frog person, and I will say I really struggled with that analogy because I do not know frog breeds. But with the dogs, we'll stick there. It's the idea that a mastiff, so this dog here on the left, and a poodle are not meant to be the same sizes and shapes. So as we're kind of talking about how if our kids are having body image thoughts and discussions and respecting their body, they might bring up that they look different than their friends. They want to be smaller or bigger or stronger or faster or whatever, right? And so it's the idea that our bodies are meant to be different sizes and shapes, right? And that we're not all meant to be the same size and shape. And it's the idea that even if we all ate the exact same food, we wouldn't look the exact same. So our body's needs are also differently, right? So that's also the language that I would encourage you guys to use as your kids start exploring body size and the food that they eat. Same thing for you guys. So again, lovingly calling you guys out as parents because we're the role models. We are not meant to look like our friends. If our friends have lost weight, we do not have to lose weight, right? To look like our friends and all of those things. Please know that even if you do not, you're like, Mackenzie, I don't talk about my diet and stuff in front of my kids. Even if you don't talk about it, your kids observe you and they notice it. I tell you right now, half of the kids that are like, especially the younger kids, are so perceptive. They know that you're dieting. They know that you're insecure in your body. They're watching. So please just be aware and make sure that you're having like really neutral beliefs, or at least like trying your best to show them appropriate food and body respect, because they are watching you guys. Okay. This is the phrase that I just said. I love telling kids this phrase, but it's from Jennifer Rowland, so I wanted to give her cred. Okay, this is listening to your body. Oh, I guess we have a question, so we'll start with that. So let's go question real quick. So if I were to get it pulled up.
My son will eat so fast, it's sometimes scary with foods that he really likes. And then with drinks he really likes if he earns like a poppy soda, but he's also very picky when it comes to texture, sensory things, like you mentioned. It is hitting the parent gut instinct that something is wrong, and I'm getting worried. What do you recommend to be my first step here, either with him, or who would I reach out for help?
Of course. Well, I know that today's presentation can be probably like really scary, especially if you're like Mackenzie, you just said gut instinct, and now my gut instinct is like my alarm is blaring. So please know that like everything that we're talking about is like fixable, and like you guys, like there is so much support for you guys going through this. So do not stress. When they're eating fast, you're probably hearing this like every time I've talked to you guys, be curious and reflect back to them. So that's like your number one tool always of, hey, sweet boy, I see you're eating a quick. What did you have earlier today, right? You're reflecting that back to him and saying like that, you know what that tells me? That tells me that you're hungry. That means that we need to make sure we're getting a little bit more earlier in the day. And then especially with the pickiness. So I know that we talked about that at the beginning, but remember that pyramid. So the bottom part of the pyramid is adequacy. Even if your kiddo is picky, make sure they're getting adequate goldfish. Obviously, ideally, we're not getting all of our energy or calories from goldfish. I know I'm a dietitian. I'm not recommending this, but I'm saying that in the short term, our kiddos and our bodies need nutrition. And it's okay to get food from what they can eat, especially with like super picky eaters. I'm like, even if we have the same thing every day and we only have one food from each food group, or even one food from two food groups, like we only really have carbs that we like, let's make sure we're getting enough carbs for the now to make sure that if he's super hungry, we're at least satisfying his hunger to the best that we can, while we seek help from typically a dietitian will be your first step of like evaluating everything to figure out the best step of where the kind of like mentality is coming from. Is it a fear of choking? Because that would be probably like one set of therapists that I would probably recommend you to. Is it a fear of the sensory stuff? Because then I might bring in like a speech language pathologist to figure out if there's like swallowing concerns. Like, so I would kind of like send you to the right professional depending on like the motivation underneath why. But I will say just, this is like purely just for you guys. Not every dietitian is an eating disorder specialist. And this is by no means saying like, come see me. Of course, I'd love to work with you, but it's more of like, let me at least get you guys the right referral. So come to me or come to Christy and Ashley and just say, hey, I would love a list of referrals. I'm going to get them a list of referrals in the Allen area, or at least virtual, that are specialists in these things. So I'll give them kind of like a little referral list of people that way they all have a list of people to go to. Of course, you can always reach out to me and ask questions. I'm happy to direct you to the right people. But it would be like one of those things of getting assessed, or at least having a voice conversation with a professional. Okay. Listening to body. So again, this is where I like being curious. Why does this food sound good? So if your kiddo is like, I really want Oreos, like, okay, I mean, Oreos are freaking good. Why do they sound good? What did you have to eat today? Right? Is it really the milk part of it that you want, or is it the Oreos? And then you can talk about, again, like you can talk about, well, and if you notice, obviously gut instinct, if you notice that your kiddo is like really elevated, like they're really excited, or they're really anxious, or maybe they're sad, and you're noticing they're craving certain foods, again, help redirect them and be like, okay, well, I also noticing that you're really like excited. Like, let's talk about all of that energy stuff first, and then we can figure out what we're going to have to eat. as well. Okay. So you're kind of like helping them sort through making sure the emotions aren't driving the hunger fullness, and then also helping them clue into where on the hunger fullness scale are you. Now, this is like, again, some of this stuff is a little bit more parent level. There are more kid friendly hunger fullness scales. You can Google those, and I can also provide you guys with like a handout. I can make a handout for you guys. But one is like, I'm ravenous. And then 10 is like, oh my gosh, I'm so full. You can ask your kiddos, and you can even make the scale smaller of like 1 to 5. So 1 being super hungry, 5 being super full. What number do you think you are right now? And you can just ask them. The other thing about structure, because I know screen time was a lot of your questions are about screen time. And as a dietitian, I'm going to be super honest with you. I don't usually have a huge part in screen time. That's not usually my scope as a dietitian. We can talk about it. And if y'all have questions, please put in the chat and I'll tell you what I've done in the past with it. But the biggest thing as dietitians that we talk about with screen time is that distractions, so screen time, iPad time, playing games, whatever, will keep us from listening to our body. So if our kiddos and even ourselves as adults, if we find that we're watching our favorite show like Grey's Anatomy or something, and we're snacking on popcorn, all of a sudden the bowl's gone and you're like, oh my gosh, I just had a whole bowl of popcorn. And then you're like, I like didn't even, and now I'm not gonna be hungry for dinner, or now I'm like overly full, right? When we're distracted, we're not cluing into how hungry or how full we are. Right. So it is actually best practice as a family to eat at a table. There's actually like so much science about this, you guys. Eating at a table together without distractions and having questions and discussions and like all of that as a family unit has been proven to be extremely beneficial for kiddos and very protective of disordered eating as your kiddos get older. So I will say your kids are going to be really mad at me if you're now about to say no iPad time at dinner. So tell your kids I'm sorry. But again, you can also use me as an excuse and say, well, Miss Mackenzie said that we can't do iPad time at dinner. But as soon as you finish your dinner, we'll go and we can start watching TV as a family. Okay. But that's part of building that into your structure and your schedule. This is, again, just more some questions and embodiment. Language stuff. We already talked about language stuff, but this is kind of when it comes to like body respect. You're often our worst critic, right? And so when we give our kids compliments, when we give our friends compliments, when we give our grandparents, or when our grandparents give the kids compliments, we want to avoid it all being body image related. So I have a lot of clients that I work with where they are like, well, I was always the athletic sister. I was always the one that was good at sports, and I got complimented on how strong I was and how good at soccer I was, or how whatever. And like some kids are like, I was always the smart one, and they get a bad grade. And there's just like immense pressure of like, if I'm not the smart one, or if I'm not the athletic one, or if I'm not the skinny one, or if I'm not the strong one, who am I? Right. And so I really encourage you guys as parents too, as we start modeling this language and as we build these structures, that you guys use non-appearance related compliments of, sweetheart, you light up my room. Like you like light up the room. You light up my life. You have the best laugh. I love seeing you happy, right? Like you inspire me. I love how kind you are to your friends. I love how selfless you are, right? Like things that are who they are, not what they look like or what they can accomplish, right? And that language will be very, very helpful as you guys kind of work together. Okay, let me get some questions knocked out real quick. Now I think we have 2 more.
Okay, let's see. My daughter would eat fruit for her entire meal if we let her. How do we talk about the importance of a balanced meal? She will typically eat some of her protein carbs, then just ask for something else. Should we withhold the fruit until she eats more of a balanced meal first, or how do we navigate that?
Yeah, that is such a good question. And it's always so cute when kids like love fruit. It's funny because I feel like most of the time I'm trying to get the kiddos to eat fruit. So it's always funny when it's the other way around. So what I typically recommend is one of the best things is actually like to keep things really neutral. So like to offer fruit with her meal, but then really educate her on the importance of all of the food groups. So again, you can be like, sweetheart, I love how much you love bananas. That's so fun. Like I know bananas are freaking awesome, but I use the analogy of Legos a lot with my kids. If you have a girl, you can maybe use like different like analogies, like use an analogy that they are interested in, because then they're going to like identify more with it. But usually Legos are a pretty easy one. Well, so let's say fruit provides green Legos. Your whole structure or your whole masterpiece is going to be a bunch of green Legos, right? The best Legos in the world have all the colors. Have all the color Legos, right? So if you were to build a Lego kit, you would have 5 different colors, right? And it would make a masterpiece. And so I want to make sure your body is the same way. If you give your body the same colored Lego, we're only going to get the same color Lego, right? And your body actually needs all of the Legos to be strong, to do whatever. Again, think about like what you find what your daughter finds interesting. So if it were, I was a soccer player, so I always use that as an example. So if she like loves soccer, you can be like, hey, as soccer players, you have to have all of the Legos to kick, to run, to jump, to do all the things, right? And so right now you're only getting one. And so I really need to make sure that yes, you can totally have the banana and get your like green Legos or yellow Legos or whatever. But we got to find a way to get the other Legos too. So let's make sure that we get that now. And if not now, we got to make sure we get it at some point during the day, right? And so that's kind of how I would to have the discussion. But withholding it, so this is with anything, it's even with sugar, because most of the time, going to be really honest, most of the time kiddos aren't just eating a bunch of fruit all the time. They're wanting sugary things or things like that. So when we withhold things that people like or want, they're going to try to get sneaky to get those things, right? It's like telling me like, Mackenzie, you can't have Nutella. And so I put Nutella on this like mental shelf of like Nutella is off limits, right? So when I'm at a friend's house and there's Nutella, what am I going to do? I'm gonna eat the whole jar. I'm gonna have the whole jar of Nutella, right? And that's because as humans, when we're told something's off limits, we want it more. You know what I mean? And so this mentality of like allowing her to have the things that taste good, but then really educating and empowering her. And again, part of that motivational interviewing is what it's called, is really making sure that you tie in something that's important to her and why only having fruit will impact what's important to her. When you go hang out with friends, if you only have fruit, like we're not gonna have enough energy to go do X, Y, and Z. Again, I'm giving only the same examples. Like you only have, if you want to go walk around the mall with your friends, you're not gonna have the energy to do that. Okay. I know there's only one more question, so I'm going to just answer that one real quick. He's very active and thin, muscular by worry. He isn't getting enough nutrition. He also does have ADHD, but not on medication. Yeah, so that is actually like, I will say, whoever put this question in, it has been super common recently. Like I would say like half my caseload right now is ARFID, and the other half is kiddos that it's not necessarily an eating disorder, but they aren't eating enough for their body to like be in an appropriate place in the growth chart. Like they're very thin typically, and they typically don't have an appetite, but it's not on like purpose. It's not like intentional because they have body image concerns or anorexia or anything like that. Just because they like don't think about food. They're just generally have a lack of interest in food. So that's where it comes to structure. And actually I'm going to skip the section, but I'm going to come back. I promise. So no one stress. Okay. This is the cast analogy. Okay. I hope none of you have broken your arm, but as someone who played soccer, I broke my arm too many times. So this is one of my favorite analogies because if you have not broken your arm, to give you a brief overview, when you break your arm, you typically wear like a splint right when it hurts, and then you get a cast on it to get it in like a really structured place for it to heal. And then you're in a cast for a few weeks, if not months. And then you get a brace. So then it's like more flexible and you have a brace, and then you have nothing, but you have to be careful and be very intentional about not doing too much with it, right? So it's like kind of that stair step process. Our routines are the same way. So when I think about what you just had, whatever the user had put in the question about he's thin, he doesn't have ADHD, maybe doesn't have an appetite, all that kind of stuff, structure is the most important thing. And I will say, healthy routines are about safety and consistency, not about control. So when we put structures in place at your homes, it's not about you guys being in control or you or your kiddos feeling in control. It's the idea that it's a protective thing, and it creates an element of safety where kids know what to expect. And that's where like appropriate boundaries come in place. I think that as a whole, I notice that oftentimes a lot of families don't hold consistent boundaries. So they'll like maybe ground their kid, but they don't ground them the same way every time. Like they do something or they put chore charts in place, but they don't actually always do the chore charts. They sometimes get out of the chore charts or forget about the chore charts because let's be honest, all of our lives are busy and we forget they exist. And then we're like, crap, we have a chore chart. Please do the dishes, right? So please keep in mind that when our relationship with food, obviously we'll start there as a dietitian. When our relationship with food is broken, so in the case of I think it was your son, when we don't have an appetite or we typically just can't eat consistently enough, whether it's ADHD, no appetite, etc., a cast. So a very, very rigid structure that is good of like in terms of like, you know what to expect. It's consistent. So I personally, and I'll just kind of speak about my ADHD and what I do with my clients is for older teens or adults who don't have a good appetite, I have alarms on my phone. right? So every 2 to 3 hours, I have an alarm that orients me to what time it is. So I'm just like, oh, I need to make sure I have a snack. Okay, I'm gonna make sure I'm gonna go get a snack. I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna be like revived and all that kind of stuff. Or I'll put in my like work calendar, I'll block out 15 minutes between clients and I'm like, okay, this is my morning snack time. And I go take a break, go to the restroom, do all the things, because you can get so either locked in or so distracted by so many things that you don't realize how hungry you are. With kiddos, it's about you guys setting that for them. They don't have phones usually in elementary school, right? So it's up to you and the teachers to kind of say, okay, this is the structure for the day. So I know that most schools in elementary school either have like a snack time, their lunchtime is at the same time every day. That also starts with before they even get to school. So they wake up at the same time every morning. So you guys always wake them up at 8 a.m. or whatever. I don't know what time y'all start, but y'all wake them up at 7 a.m. Their breakfast is always on the table, ready for them by 7:15. Then they go and get their backpack and brush their teeth at 7:30. You leave the house at 7:45, right? As much as we can provide them a routine in the morning, school obviously is very structured. And that's why, again, on breaks, it's really hard because the kids typically forget to eat all day because they're not used to the things moving them through their day. But then they have their snacks at school, their meals at school. And then when they get home, same thing. They know what to expect with, okay, I have soccer practice. I'm gonna have a snack before. Then when I get home, I have dinner, bedtime routine, etc. So they kind of just know what to expect. And also their body's hunger fullness cues get aligned with it. But I call that a cast. And as they get older, as you find they're kind of their body and their brains are getting used to having a structure that they feel safe with, then you can get a little bit more flexible with the structure. So instead of it being a cast where it's like, all right, 7:45, we're out the door, we're on our way to school. It's like, okay, it's kind of between 7:45 and 8, right? And we still have a rough estimate of that structure, but it's a little bit more fluid. This also applies to weekends, you guys. So sometimes a lot of my clients and parents, and that please know that I know how busy y'all are during the week. And so I think that as parents and adults, we want free time and like just like to free for all on the weekends. But it is really important that we still have a structure on the weekends. It can be more flexible, but we build in structured playtime. We build in the meal times. We say, hey, this is you go to your room time and like you kind of like have your own time, but they kind of know from this time to this time, this is what they can expect, etc. So it's really helpful. But I think of a cast, the more something is broken, the more a relationship with food is broken, the more someone doesn't have an appetite, the more you find emotionally they get really anxious. Just put a safe structure in place. Have them like have contained time where they know what to expect, and it kind of moves them through their day. Okay. I don't think any questions came in during that time. And I'm trying to see, I think we're at time, correct?
Yeah, there are questions in the chat. Those were all
Okay.
in the Q&A, so I don't know if you
Perfect.
want.
Yeah, and I know that we're at time. So guys, please know that you guys can look at all of this. Biggest thing for the movement piece is it should be joyful. Young kids should not be exercising to earn their food, to like change their bodies, things of that sort. So I have on here like kind of what movement looks like. So it helps with mood, focus and sleep, etc. Green and red flags. So again, y'all are going to get all of this. It was very ambitious for me to think we were going to get through all of this together. And then routine and why it's important, and some sleep things of kind of how important sleep is, and then some tips and tricks on how you address this with your kids. So some of those like be curious, all of that kind of stuff is in here as well. So I'm sorry that we kind of ran over time a little bit. I'm a talker, as y'all can tell. But I'm free until 1:30, so I'm obviously happy to answer questions if y'all want to stay on.
Okay. Yeah, that would be great. Christy, you want to roll through some of those?
Yep. Any recommendations with a family for a family where the parents are picky eaters as well?
Hey, I have so many clients where that happens. And to be honest, I have a few foods that are not my preference as well. I think the biggest thing is a phrase I always come back to when I work with kids. So I always make a family rule of you can't yuck my yum. Okay. So there's no yucking your yum. So like we want to still, even though you are picky, still introduce your kids to new foods as much as possible. So if you are able to or comfortable to model trying new foods for your kid, that's also a plus, plus, plus. So if you're like, hey, I want to show them in good faith that I'm willing to try foods that I don't like to encourage them to try new foods, I think that would be amazing. Obviously, please try to control your reactions. Don't be like, "Ugh, this is disgusting." Like, don't have like this big reaction that it's the worst thing you've ever eaten. But part of exposure and response prevention, so that therapeutic modality for ARFID, is that the more you try a food, the more normal it becomes. But the kind of like a good little coined small thing is you have to try a food about 21 times before you know if you like it or not. Okay. So just because you tried something once does not mean it's like, now I love it, right? And it doesn't mean that once you try it once and you hate it, you're like, never having it again. So it just needs to be one of those things where you show and you give your kids opportunities to try those things. And some of that will come with friends. So I will say like the like natural positive peer pressure. Again, that's not peer pressure, but like when kids see other kids and other people eating new foods, they're typically wanting to try those things as well. So there will be a natural element of them doing that at school as well if you don't feel like comfortable doing that at home. But reach out to me. There's a few other little tips and tricks, but for now, that's kind of the overview.
All right. Is there any tool, preferably free, that can give me the amount of proteins and other important nutrients my child should get per day based on their weight, height, age, how active during the day, total time spent actively playing? I also struggle to feed my picky eater, so whenever he delays going to bed using my weak spot, "Mama, I'm still hungry," I sometimes cave in because I'm unsure if he has had enough food.
Yeah. So that's a really good question. I'm just to be really transparent with you. I don't, there's a lot of, so since we all eat food, we all think we're experts. Okay. So since everyone in the world eats, we're all like, see, I know what I'm doing. I'm fine. Right. And so there's a lot of people who put nutrition information out there that it's not actually evidence-based. So as a dietitian, I'm always really hesitant about like saying like, yes, this tool is amazing. And then again, I'm just gonna be like just really transparent. They recently changed. I used to send clients to the MyPlate website, which was like through the government. It was just a really good, like just general guide. They actually recently changed the dietary guidelines and actually was hoping I would just give a brief overview. The dietary guidelines recently changed and they changed the food pyramid resource that the government provided. As a dietitian, I don't actually back up a lot of the things that were recently changed on it, especially on the kids section. So for now, I would actually recommend you go to a dietitian. If it is a concern where you feel like right now you can't afford seeing a dietitian, again, reach out to me. I'm happy to get creative with you and stuff like that. But just as a brief overview, the new dietary guidelines, there are some questionable things where I don't actually feel like it's aligned with what research has told us over the last several years. So I'm actually really hesitant to give that resource now, but unfortunately it replaced the MyPlate website, but it doesn't, I think, do the same justice. So I would just recommend going to a dietitian for now because it actually came out last week. So it's all we as dietitians are navigating this very newly. So I used to actually say that was a really good resource. And now I'm going to have to find new resources to provide you guys since I don't know if I would defer you guys there.
Okay, what do you recommend for a child who eats snacks frequently as well as multiple meal servings? My son is 7 years old and his appetite has increased over the last 6 months. He has picked up some weight, which has me a little concerned, and I would like to know how I can help him reduce the servings or frequency of eating.
Yeah, 100%. So again, I think that there's a mix of like conversations to be had as well as like providing structure to his day. So I think that I would start off by like if I were your dietitian, I would start off by kind of seeing what an average day looks like. And if you notice that he typically is hungrier in the evenings, because like maybe the mornings he didn't get enough, and then he's ravenous when he gets home from school. So at 3 o'clock, he eats like 15 snacks because he's super hungry because he had a long day at school. Then I would make sure that his lunch and his breakfast got bumped up a little bit. And you typically want to bump up protein and fat, right? Because that makes you feel more full and satisfied. As well as obviously making sure we still have carbohydrates and other food groups. But if I'm like noticing someone's really hungry, then I always try to be like, did you have all the food groups to make you feel full? Another thing is the distraction. So is he distracting himself? And so he's like distracted eating a bunch of servings. Is he excited? So again, that mood kind of like curiosity of like, is he really anxious when he's eating a lot of these foods? So there's a few different like questions I would ask, and then I would just start structuring his like kind of plate. So I would just kind of provide him kind of a plate and structure it. I wouldn't demonize or say he can't have more food because I think I told you guys in the beginning, this is like peak growth period. And like sometimes we get like hunger increases during periods of growth. So just for generalization, obviously I can't tell you since I don't know your specific kid situation, but I would actually not change it right away. If you try some of those techniques and kind of figure out structuring his day, figuring out if he has all the food groups, and that's not working, then I would just reach out to a dietitian just for 1 or 2 sessions.
It looks like the last one. What's the ideal screen time for younger kids?
Ideal screen time. So again, as a dietitian, I'm gonna really defer that to therapists, to be honest. As a dietitian, my stance is as long as it is not impacting your ability to feed yourself, it's not impacting your like distraction ability. Again, part of the presentation we didn't get too much into today was movement. So movement is really, really, really beneficial for emotion regulation. I always ask all the parents or the adults I present to of like, when's the last time you just like played? You didn't go to the gym to like walk on the treadmill. You didn't do whatever. You just played with your kid. Like there's a lot of endorphins that come from that. Movement is really helpful, again, physically and emotionally. So as long as they're able to do appropriate movement and appropriate play and imagination for their age kind of group and appropriateness, and it doesn't impact their ability to listen to their body and eat appropriately, I kind of defer that to parental guidance. And I think that's one thing as dietitians and therapists that we get a lot of questions about. So we don't take the place of parenting, right? We supplement you and really empower you guys as parents, but some of that does come back to you get to kind of choose as a parent what rules and boundaries you have in place. We can help you find those, but we can't make the ultimate decision.
I do want to jump in and say really quickly, you asked about the amount of screen time, Mom. There we have plenty of previous presentations that Dr. Ryan Smith presented on this year. One of our big topics is social media and the amount of screen time our kids are having. He speaks specifically to that. So I encourage you to go to our website. We have a lot of those presentations that are pre-recorded there for you to view. So we're also bringing him back to Community Engagement Night, which is scheduled for April 7th. It will be in person, and he's going to talk about digital detox and how to set the scene for your summer. He talks all about making sure that your kids don't sleep with phones in their rooms and making sure that they don't jump on a phone when they wake up in the morning or on phones before they go to bed at night. And he has done a lot of research in his doctoral program to just hit all of those things. So I highly encourage you to check out those previous presentations because I think he'll answer your question in there.
That's awesome. That's so cool. You'll have the best speakers, seriously. Okay, I think there's one more. The social media sites, yeah. So it's feeding picky kids and then feeding picky children. Ironically, they're 2 different people. But there are really good like visuals about like kind of what food mapping is. So again, if it's like we want to have more protein, so we start with chicken nuggets, then we go to potentially chicken tenders, then we go to grilled chicken, then you kind of like just the food mapping of how to get from one food that your kid likes all the way to hopefully a new food that might provide more nutrient benefits.
Another question popped up. Do you have any recommendations for teen vegetarian meals, maybe books or sites?
Yes, let me kind of get some of those compiled and I can send them with the slides to Christy and Ashley. Oh, thank you, Queen Aura. Thank you. Yes. I know they're really close, so thank you. It's not feeding picky, it's feeding picky eaters. Thank you. Appreciate you. They're just so close. But yeah, so I can definitely send you guys a few resources for that as well. I know vegetarianism and like veganism, there's a lot of like really great resources. I'm gonna be honest, for a long time, there were no good cookbooks, especially for adults, much less like kids. So I think we've actually gotten a lot more really great ones. One of the treatment centers that I've worked with in the past actually developed one. So let me go get a few of those and I can kind of send them as recommendation to the team. Oh, perfect. Sneaky Chef. A friend just recommended it, hiding healthy foods in kids' meals. Yeah, and again, there's kind of a split bag on like sneaking healthier like options into meals. Again, I'm actually not opposed to it, but I also know that a lot of times as kids get older, they feel sometimes lied to. And sometimes if we can get them bought into trying some of those like kind of like more nutrient dense options that they're like mentally aware of and open to, that usually will get like longer term buy-in. But again, I'm not opposed to it. It's just more of like sometimes people have like different dietitians and different parents have different experiences based on kids' personalities too. So if a kid's personality is one where they can somewhat be like distrusting if they're like lied to and stuff, versus some kids are like, oh, thank God I didn't know that there was spinach in my smoothie, right? Like there's kind of the plus or minus, but that's actually really cool. I'll have to look at that sneaky chef. That's exciting. Okay.
All right. Well, Mackenzie, you were amazing. This was great. Lots of positive feedback in the chat and questions. So thank you so much for your time. And we're so excited to have you back on the 22nd.
I know. I'm excited as well. If y'all need anything, let me know. Again, it was a lot to go over and we didn't get over half of it, but we'll send the slides out. And then I'm going to probably wait and get some of y'all's feedback. And then I can make a one pager, including some of those like resources, like the cookbooks and stuff. And I'll send them out to you guys.
Perfect. You're awesome. We appreciate you, girl.
Of course. Okay.
Have a
Bye,
good day.
guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Have a good day.